The scent of sandalwood and expensive cologne usually signaled home, a sanctuary from the cutthroat world of the Su family's business empire. I walked into our master suite, my heels clicking softly on the polished hardwood, a tired but happy smile on my lips. I had finished the merger negotiations 3 days early just to surprise Mo Chen for our second anniversary. The room was dim, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the heavy velvet curtains. Mo Chen was in bed, his back to me, the duvet pulled high. He looked so peaceful, his breathing steady. My heart swelled with a warmth I now realize was pure, unadulterated poison. I began to undress, dropping my blazer onto a chair. I wanted nothing more than to slip into bed and feel the familiar heat of my husband. I walked to the side of the bed and reached down, pulling back the heavy silk covers to slide in. But the space beside him wasn't empty. A shock of blonde hair spilled across the pillow, my pillow. And there, huddled under the duvet, was a woman. Her eyes flew open, wide with a mixture of terror and a strange, sick triumph. But it wasn't just the fact that she was in my bed. It was what she was wearing. She was draped in my favorite white silk wedding robe, the one with the intricate lace sleeves I had specially commissioned for our honeymoon. The fabric was wrinkled, clinging to her skin, still warm from their encounter. Sue ran. You weren't supposed to be back until Friday. Mo Chen bolted upright, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and the woman cowering beside him. Get out, I whispered, my voice trembling so violently I could barely stand. Get out of my robe. Get out of my bed. Get out of my house. The woman, Lin Wei, my own social secretary, scrambled out of the bed, clutching the silk robe around her. I'm sorry, President Su. Mo Chen told me. He told me you were separating. Separating. I turned to Mo Chen, the betrayal cutting through me like a jagged blade. Is that what you told her while you were spending my family's money? While you were living in the house my father bought us? Mo Chen's expression shifted instantly. The panic vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating sneer. He stood up, towering over me. Don't act so holy, Su Ran. You're always working. You're more married to your spreadsheets than to me. Lin Wei actually knows how to be a woman. A woman? I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You mean a thief. And you're a parasite, Mo Chen. Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. I'm cutting off your allowance, your board seat, and your inheritance. You'll leave this house with nothing but the clothes on your back. The mention of the inheritance triggered something feral in him. Mo Chen's eyes turned dark, his jaw clenching. He knew I meant it. Without the Su name, he was a nobody with a mountain of gambling debts I had quietly been covering. You're not cutting me off, he hissed, stepping toward me. Watch me, I said, turning to reach for the phone on the nightstand to call security. I said no. Mo Chen roared. He lunged at me, his hands slamming into my shoulders with terrifying force. I wasn't prepared for the violence. My feet slipped on the silk rug, and I went flying backward. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the ceiling fan spinning, the terrified face of Lin Wei, and then the world exploded into white-hot pain. The back of my head collided with the sharp, uncompromising corner of the white marble nightstand. I heard a sickening crack, followed by the warmth of blood blooming against the cold stone. I fell to the floor, my vision blurring. Through the haze, I saw Mo Chen standing over me, his chest heaving. He didn't look horrified. He looked relieved. It was an accident, I heard him mutter as the darkness began to swallow me. She tripped. Everyone saw how tired she was from the trip. It was just a tragic accident. The last thing I felt wasn't the pain, but the freezing realization that I had died for a man who didn't even have the grace to mourn me. I gasped, my lungs burning as if I had been underwater for a lifetime. I threw myself forward, my hands clutching at my throat, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I expected to feel the wet stickiness of blood and the hard edge of marble. Instead, I felt soft, cool cotton. I opened my eyes and squinted against the bright, unapologetic morning sun streaming through the windows. This wasn't the master suite of the penthouse. This was my old bedroom at the Su Villa, the one I had lived in before I married Mo Chen. Miss Ran? Are you alright? I heard a noise. The door opened, and Auntie Lu, our longtime housekeeper who had passed away 3 months after my wedding, stepped in. She looked exactly as she had years ago, vibrant, healthy, and holding a silver tray with a steaming cup of tea. Auntie Lu. My voice was a croak. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched her arm. She was warm. She was real. You must have had a nightmare, dear, she said, setting the tray down. It's a big day, after all. The tailor is downstairs with your bridal trousseau. You've been waiting weeks for that silk robe to arrive. The silk robe. The date on the calendar on my desk flashed like a warning sign. May 14th, 2023. I was back. I was exactly 6 months away from my wedding, and today was the day I was supposed to buy the very garment that Lin Wei would eventually wear while sleeping with my husband. I'm fine, Auntie. Just a very bad dream, I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked younger. My eyes hadn't yet been dimmed by the exhaustion of trying to sustain a one-sided marriage. I looked at the marble nightstand in the corner of this room. It was wood. Safe, blunt wood. I dressed quickly, my mind racing. In my previous life, I was a fool. I had ignored the red flags because I wanted to believe in a fairy tale. I had given Mo Chen access to my accounts, a seat on the board, and the keys to my heart. Not this time. This time, I would be the architect of his destruction. I went downstairs to the grand parlor. The tailor was there, spreading out a shimmering expanse of white silk. It was beautiful, ethereal, and made me want to vomit. It's exquisite, isn't it, Su Ran? I froze. Mo Chen was standing in the doorway, looking every bit the charming, doting fiancé. He walked over and tried to put his arm around my waist. In my mind, I saw him pushing me toward the marble. I instinctively stepped away, pretending to examine the lace on the sleeve. It's interesting, I said, my voice cold. Interesting. Mo Chen laughed, his eyes crinkling in that way I used to find endearing. You've been talking about this robe for months. You said you wanted to wear it on our first morning as husband and wife. I think my tastes have changed, Mo Chen, I said, turning to the tailor. It's a lovely piece of work, but I think it's a bit too fragile. It looks like the kind of thing that stains easily. The kind of thing that's hard to get clean once it's been soiled. The tailor looked confused. But Miss Su, this is the finest silk. I'll take it, I interrupted, a dark idea taking root in my mind. But don't gift wrap it for me. I have a very specific use for it. And Mo Chen. Yes, darling, he asked, looking slightly miffed by my tone. I'm going to be very busy with the new security protocols at the office today. I've decided to hire a consultant to overlook our personal assets. You don't mind, do you? Of course not, he said, though I saw the flicker of greed in his eyes. He thought consultant meant more money to manage. I walked out of the house, the silk robe in a box under my arm. I didn't head to the office. I headed to a place I hadn't visited in years. A fortress-like building on the edge of the city. I needed a protector. I needed the one man Mo Chen feared more than anything. I needed Han Xiao. The headquarters of Xiao Security was a monolith of steel and glass, a reflection of the man who owned it. Han Xiao wasn't just a businessman, he was a legend. A former general who had retired early after a mysterious injury, he had built a global security empire that handled everything from high-stakes intelligence to the personal safety of heads of state. He was also the boy who lived next door to me for 15 years. My childhood protector. The man who had looked at me with such intensity the day I announced my engagement that I had felt a momentary urge to run away with him. But I had chosen the safe option. I had chosen Mo Chen. I'm sorry, Miss Su, but General Han is in a briefing. He doesn't see anyone without an appointment, the receptionist said, her voice polite but firm. Tell him it's Little Fox, I said, using the nickname he had given me when I was 6 and had stolen his favorite compass. Tell him I'm here to return a favor. 2 minutes later, I was being escorted to the top floor. The office was minimalist, smelling of cedar and gun oil. Han Xiao was standing by the window, his back to me. He was broader than I remembered, his presence filling the room with a heavy, magnetic weight. When he turned, his eyes, sharp, dark, and predatory, locked onto mine. "Su Ran," he said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated in my chest. "You're 6 months early for the wedding. Did the groom run away?" "No," I said, walking to the center of the room. "But he's about to wish he had." Han Xiao walked toward me, his limp, the only sign of his injury, almost imperceptible. He stopped just a foot away, tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to see him. "You look different. Your eyes are older." "I've seen the end of the world, Han Xiao," I said, my voice steady. "And I've come back to make sure it doesn't happen again. I need your help. Not as a friend, but as a specialist. I want to hire Xiao Security to audit my fiancé. I want every debt, every lie, and every mistress he's ever touched on my desk by the end of the week." Han Xiao's eyebrows rose. "Mo Chen? The golden boy. I thought you were in love." "I was in love with a ghost," I said. "Now, I'm in love with reality. And the reality is, Mo Chen is a parasite who is trying to bleed my family dry. I need you to help me freeze him out. Financially, socially, and legally." Han Xiao studied me for a long moment, his gaze so intense I felt like he was reading the very secrets I had brought back from the grave. He reached out, his hand hovering near my cheek before he pulled it back. "You know my price, Su Ran," he said softly. "I'll pay whatever you want," I replied. "I don't want your money," Han Xiao said, stepping closer until I could feel the heat radiating from him. "I want your trust. If I do this, you do exactly as I say. No more mercy for that man. No more second chances. We burn him to the ground, or we don't start at all." "I've already burned the bridge, Han Xiao," I said, holding up the box with the silk robe. "I'm just waiting for the wind to pick up." "Then consider the wind caught," he said, a slow, lethal smile spreading across his face. "Welcome back, little fox. I've been waiting for you to wake up." As I left his office, I felt a weight lift. For the first time since I woke up in this past, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter, and I had the biggest wolf in the forest by my side. The following days were a blur of calculated performance. To the world, and especially to Mo Chen, I remained the devoted fiancé, busy with wedding plans and corporate mergers. But every evening, I met with Han Xiao in the back of darkened cars or in his private residence. He was efficient. Within 72 hours, his team had uncovered a web of deceit that was even worse than I had imagined. Mo Chen hadn't just been gambling. He had been funneling money from my father's charity foundations into offshore accounts. And Lin Wei? She wasn't just his mistress. She was his accomplice, the one providing him with the internal codes to the Su Corporation's financial servers. "He's more ambitious than I gave him credit for," Han Xiao said, tossing a folder onto the table in his living room. It was late, and we were sitting on his leather sofa, the city lights twinkling behind him. "He's planning to accelerate the wedding. He's heard rumors about an internal audit and wants to be legally tied to your assets before the red flags are raised." "He thinks he's so clever," I said, flipping through the bank statements. "He thinks I'm the same Su Ran who just wants to be loved." "You aren't," Han Xiao said, his voice dropping an octave. He reached over, taking the folder from my hand and setting it aside. He took my hand in his palm calloused and warm. "I like this version of you better. The one with teeth." "I only have teeth because you gave me the courage to bite," I whispered.
"No, Su Ran. You've always had them.
You just preferred to smile instead." He leaned in, his face inches from mine. For a second, I thought he would kiss me, but he simply tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "I've started the freeze." Quietly. "His personal accounts will look normal for the next few days, but the moment he tries to move more than $1,000, the system will lock him out. I've also placed a bug in Lin Wei's phone." "I want to see them together," I said, a cold fire burning in my chest. "I want to hear them talk about me." Han Xiao handed me a pair of headphones. I put them on and heard a familiar, oily voice. "Be patient, Wei Wei." Mo Chen's voice crackled through the line. The wedding is in 6 months, but I'm going to convince her to elope next month. Once the papers are signed, we can move the rest of the funds. Then, she can have her unfortunate accident a year into the marriage. You'll have the silk robe, the house, and me. I took the headphones off, my hands shaking. The unfortunate accident. He had been planning it even back then. He hadn't just killed me in the future. He had been killing me in his heart since before we even walked down the aisle. Do you want me to end it now? Han Xiao asked, his eyes dark with a protective fury. I can make him disappear, Su ran. It wouldn't even be difficult. No, I said, standing up. Death is too quick for him. I want him to live through the humiliation. I want him to watch as everything he thought he had stolen turns to ash. I have a better idea. There's a charity gala next weekend. The entire Su board will be there. So will Lin Wei. And the robe? Han Xiao asked. The robe is the final touch, I said. It's time to give the bride her first gift. Han Xiao stood up and walked me to the door. I'll be there, Su ran. In the shadows. Just give me the signal, and I'll pull the plug on his world. I won't need a signal, I said, looking up at him. The whole room will hear the crash. The week leading up to the gala was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. I treated Lin Wei with an exaggerated, sisterly kindness that I knew was making her nervous. I gave her access to folders that were filled with fake financial data, a digital trail that would lead her and Mo Chen directly into a trap of their own making. Lin Wei, you've been working so hard lately, I said, leaning against her desk with a sweet, fake smile. I've decided that you should come to the charity gala on Friday. Consider it a reward for your loyalty. Lin Wei's eyes lit up with a mixture of greed and suspicion. Oh, President Su, I couldn't. It's such a high-profile event. Nonsense. You're like family to me. In fact, I have a special gift for you. I'll send it to your apartment tomorrow. I want you to wear it to the gala. It's a designer piece I bought, but, well, I realized it doesn't quite suit me. Thank you, she gushed. You're so generous. I am, aren't I? I whispered as I walked away. I went home and looked at the box containing the silk robe. I had Han Xiao's team treat the fabric with a special UV-reactive dye that was invisible to the naked eye but would glow a vivid, sickly neon green under the specific black lights used in the gala's artistic modern photography booth. But that wasn't the best part. I had also tucked a small, high-sensitivity microphone into the lining of the sash. Friday evening arrived. I dressed in a gown of midnight blue velvet, thick, heavy, and regal. A complete contrast to the fragile woman I used to be. I met Han Xiao in the foyer of the hotel. He was in full dress uniform, his medals glinting under the chandeliers. He looked terrifyingly handsome. Are you ready, little fox? He asked, offering me his arm. I've never been more ready, I said. We entered the ballroom. Mo Chen was already there, holding a glass of scotch and playing the part of the successful businessman. He looked at me, then at Han Xiao, his eyes flaring with jealousy. General Han, Mo Chen said, his voice tight. I didn't realize you were on the guest list. I go where I'm needed, Mo Chen, Han Xiao said, his voice a low threat. And tonight I'm needed here. Su ran. Why are you with him? Mo Chen whispered as he pulled me aside. It doesn't look good for the image. I'm not worried about my image, Mo Chen, I said, looking over his shoulder.
Oh, look.
Lin Wei has arrived. The room seemed to quiet down as Lin Wei walked in. She was wearing the silk wedding robe, which she had awkwardly styled as an evening wrap over a cheap slip dress. To the untrained eye, she looked like she was trying too hard. To me, she looked like a walking death warrant. Is that your robe? Mo Chen hissed, his face turning pale. I gave it to her, I said loudly, attracting the attention of several nearby board members. She seemed so fond of my things. I thought it was time she had something of her own. Lin Wei walked up to us, her chin held high, oblivious to the trap. President Su, don't I look wonderful? You look exactly like what you are, Lin Wei, I said, my voice carrying across the room. But before we celebrate, why don't we all head to the photography booth? I want to capture this moment of sisterhood. I saw Han Xiao move toward the light control panel. It was time for the show to begin. The photography booth was a large, open-air set at the end of the ballroom, surrounded by the elite of the city. I led Mo Chen and Lin Wei toward it, the board members following out of sheer curiosity. "I want a photo of the three of us," I said, stepping between them. "A record of the team that runs my company." As we stepped onto the platform, the regular lights dimmed and the artistic UV lights hummed to life. Suddenly, Lin Wei's robe didn't look white anymore. It glowed with a blinding, radioactive green. And because she had been wearing it while Mo Chen was secretly touching her in the hallway 10 minutes ago, a fact I knew thanks to Han Xiao's surveillance, there were glowing green handprints all over her waist and shoulders. Handprints that matched the size of the glow now appearing on Mo Chen's palms. The crowd gasped. It was a bizarre, undeniable visual of their intimacy. "What is this?" Lin Wei shrieked, looking down at herself. "It's a reflection of the truth, Lin Wei," I said, stepping off the platform and leaving them standing in the spotlight. I signaled to Han Xiao. He pressed a button on his tablet, and the ballroom sound system, which had been playing soft jazz, suddenly cut to a recording. "Once the papers are signed, we can move the rest of the funds. Then, she can have her unfortunate accident a year into the marriage. You'll have the silk robe, the house, and me." The voice was unmistakably Mo Chen's. The room went deathly silent. My father, who had been watching from the wings, stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. "Mo Chen," my father said, his voice shaking with rage. "You are going to kill my daughter?" "It's a fake. It's a setup," Mo Chen screamed, his glowing green hands shaking. He looked at me, his face twisted in a feral panic. "Su Ran, you did this. You're insane." "No, Mo Chen," I said, walking toward him until we were inches apart. "I'm just awake. You thought you were marrying a victim. You didn't realize you were marrying your executioner." Han Xiao stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Mo Chen's shoulder. "Mo Chen, you are under citizen's arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and grand larceny. My team has already handed the offshore ledger to the police. They're waiting in the lobby." Mo Chen tried to run, but Han Xiao's grip was like iron. He went down to his knees, his golden boy image shattered forever. Lin Wei was sobbing, trying to tear off the glowing robe, but it was stuck to her, a neon mark of her shame. I looked at her, then back at the robe. "You can keep it, Lin Wei," I said, my voice cold and clear. "It's secondhand trash for a secondhand person. I don't want it back." As the police led them out in front of the entire city's elite, I felt the last of the marble's chill leave my bones. I had changed the future. Han Xiao walked up behind me, his hand resting on the small of my back. "Are you all right, little fox?" "I'm better than all right," I said, turning to him. "I'm free." "Not quite," he whispered, a rare, soft look in his eyes. "You still have to deal with the general who's been in love with you since he was 10 years old." I smiled, a real, warm smile that reached my eyes. "I think I can handle that." The aftermath of the charity gala was like a silent explosion. The shockwaves rippled through Jiang City's elite circles, leaving a trail of whispered scandals and ruined reputations in their wake. I sat behind my massive mahogany desk at the Su Corporation, the morning sun casting long, golden fingers across the office floor. On the television screen mounted on the wall, the news was a relentless cycle of the fall of the golden boy. Footage of Mo Chen being led away by the police, his face a mask of primal terror and his hands still faintly glowing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station, had gone viral. He looked small. Without the Su name, without the tailored suits I had paid for, and without the unearned arrogance of my father's backing, he was just a desperate man caught in a web of his own making. I felt a strange, cold peace as I watched him. The woman who had died on the marble floor was finally at rest. A heavy, rhythmic knock at the door broke my trance. I didn't need to ask who it was. The air in the room seemed to charge with a magnetic intensity before the door even swung open. Han Xiao walked in, looking every bit the commander of his own empire. He wasn't in his formal military dress today. Instead, he wore a charcoal gray suit that hugged his broad shoulders and emphasized the lethal grace of his movements. He was carrying a silver tray with a bottle of vintage champagne and 2 chilled glasses. "The final nails are in the coffin, little fox," Han Xiao said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate in the very floorboards. He set the tray on my desk with a satisfying, metallic clink. "You're very efficient, General," I said, standing up to meet his gaze. I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with corporate mergers. "Is it truly as total as it looks?" "Total and absolute," he replied. He stepped around the desk, closing the distance between us until I could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of cedarwood and rain that always followed him. "Xiao Security has finished the forensic audit. Every penny he funneled into those offshore accounts has been frozen and rerouted back to your father's charity foundations. The board has also moved to strip him of his honorary titles. As of 10 minutes ago, Mo Chen is officially a persona non grata in this city." I let out a breath. I felt like I'd been holding for 2 lifetimes. "And the divorce?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Han Xiao reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a set of legal documents. "Served to him in his cell an hour ago," he said, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips. He tried to throw a fit, screaming that he wouldn't sign, that he was still the future of the Su family. But when my lawyers explained that his cooperation might be the only thing keeping him out of a maximum security ward for the conspiracy to commit murder, his hand didn't stop shaking until the ink was dry. He handed me the papers. I traced the jagged, trembling signature of the man who had killed me. Seeing his name on a divorce decree felt more powerful than seeing it on a tombstone. It was the ultimate proof that I had reclaimed my life. "You've been a warrior for weeks, Su Ran," Han Xiao said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently catching my chin, forcing me to look up into his dark, steady eyes. "But even the best soldiers need to know when the battle is won. You've done it. You've frozen him out of your world." "I couldn't have done it without you, Jingxin," I started to say, using his name for the first time. "Don't," he interrupted softly. "I didn't do this for the Su Corporation, and I certainly didn't do it for justice. I did it because I've been in love with the girl who stole my compass since I was 10 years old. I spent years watching you from the shadows, waiting for you to see the man standing right in front of you. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, a heat that finally pushed away the lingering chill of the marble nightstand. "I'm seeing you now," I said. "Then prove it," he said, his gaze intensifying. "I want a real first date, Su Ran. No wires, no hidden microphones, no surveillance teams, and definitely no silk robes. Just a man and a woman who have a lot of lost time to make up for." I smiled, a real, radiant smile that reached my eyes. I reached out and took the champagne glass he offered. "I think the General can be persuaded," I said. We clinked our glasses together, the crystal ringing out like a victory bell. The freeze was complete, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the winter. I had the sun standing right beside me. The first time I walked down an aisle, I was a girl draped in white lace and blinding ignorance, stepping toward a man who viewed me as a paycheck and a stepping stone. I had felt a coldness then, a premonition I had mistaken for wedding jitters. In this life, exactly 1 year after the neon lights of the gala exposed the truth, the air in the bridal suite felt entirely different. It didn't smell like the stifling lilies of a funeral. It smelled like jasmine, fresh rain, and a future I had built with my own 2 hands. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror, my heart beating with a steady, powerful rhythm. I wasn't wearing a fragile silk robe today. Instead, I wore a structural gown of heavy, ivory satin, a dress that felt like armor and looked like a masterpiece. It was elegant, but possessed a weight that reminded me I was no longer a girl who could be easily pushed aside. Miss Su, or should I say, Madam General? Auntie Lu's daughter, who had stepped into her mother's role with a grace that brought tears to my eyes, walked in with a bouquet of deep, blood-red roses. "The guests are seated. Your father is waiting at the door," You look like a queen. I feel like myself, Ming, I said, catching my reflection. My eyes were clear, the shadows of the marble nightstand finally erased. That's more than enough. I walked down the grand staircase of the Sioux estate, my father waiting at the bottom. He looked 10 years younger, his health restored by the peace of knowing his daughter was safe. He took my arm, his hand trembling slightly with emotion. "You did it, Ranner," he whispered as we approached the heavy oak doors of the garden chapel. "You saved us all. I'm just sorry I didn't see through him sooner." "We both saw what we wanted to see, Dad," I replied, squeezing his arm. "But today, we see the truth." The doors swung open, and the sunlight of a perfect Jiang City afternoon poured in. As the music swelled, a triumphant, soaring orchestral piece, I saw him. Han Xiao was standing at the altar in his full military dress uniform, his medals glinting like stars against the dark fabric. He didn't look like a cold general or a security tycoon in that moment. He looked like a man who had finally reached the end of a very long, very lonely journey. As I walked toward him, our eyes locked, and the rest of the world, the board members, the high society guests, the cameras, simply dissolved. There was only the sound of my pulse and the heat of his gaze. When my father placed my hand in his, Han Xiao's grip was firm, warm, and absolute. "You're late, little fox," he murmured, a mischievous glint in his dark eyes as he leaned down to whisper in my ear. I had to make sure the bank accounts were still frozen. I teased back, my voice thick with emotion. The ceremony was a blur of sacred vows and shared smiles. When the priest pronounced us husband and wife, Han Xiao didn't hesitate. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me with a passion that made the crowd erupt into cheers. It was a kiss that promised protection without prison and love without lies. Later that evening, as the reception roared with laughter and music below, Han Xiao and I stepped onto the private balcony of our new home. The city skyline stretched out before us, a sea of twinkling lights. "Do you ever think about the marble?" he asked softly, his arm draped over my shoulder, pulling me flush against his side. "Only to remember how lucky I am to be standing here," I said, leaning my head against his chest, listening to the steady, honest thrum of his heart. "The girl who died that night was a fool, Xiao. But she gave me the strength to be the woman who loves you." "I don't care about the fool or the genius," he said, turning me to face him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar object, the old brass compass I had stolen from him when we were children. "I only care that you finally found your way back to me." He pressed the compass into my palm and closed my fingers over it. "The direction is always the same, Ranner. Wherever you are, that's where my home is." I looked at the compass, then up at the man who had been my shadow protector in 2 lifetimes. The reflection in the balcony glass showed a woman who was no longer afraid of the dark. I wasn't just a survivor of a betrayal, I was the architect of a destiny. And as the general pulled me back into a kiss under the Jiang City stars, I knew that the only thing I would ever fall into again was his arms.